said, Matt, how do you make a record? And Matt was like, well, we can make a record if you want. And I was like, yes, I want. He was like, all right. And we booked like a 2-day recording session, which is like not enough time, you know, but I didn't know that. And after the first day in this recording studio in Toronto, I was like, wow, I think that's the proudest I am of anything that I've ever done. And then after the second day, I was like, fuck yeah, we made a record. And Matt was like, no man, that was a recording session. There's so much left to do. I was like, I had no idea what he meant, but you know, you gotta mix it, you gotta master it, you gotta do some weird registration thing so that it goes for digital. You have to like make different artwork for the CD and the vinyl. The one thing that I knew that I wanted was to hold the vinyl LP of that record. Because if you think about the word record, it's like proof that something happened, you know? And I needed that to understand what had just occurred and that it was permanent, lasting. So I looked up this company, a vinyl pressing company in Toronto. It said so right on their website. And I called them, I sent them all the requisite material, and I said, I'd like 500 records, please. What I was going to do with 500 records, I'm not sure, because I only knew about 20 people at the time, but they were like, sure, no problem. And they called me, and they were like, Mr. Reid, your order of 500 vinyls is ready for pickup. And I was so ecstatic. I drove out there and loaded all these very heavy boxes into my car. And I got home and I ripped them open and I took out the first pressing of Songs from a Broken Chair. I was so excited. But I noticed that the album artwork that my sister had done was almost completely black. You couldn't quite make out the title of the record. And I was like, that's not quite ideal. But as long as it sounds good, doesn't matter. So I pulled out the vinyl record. And I tried to put it on my turntable, same turntable that's right over there. But the hole in the middle of the record was too small. It wouldn't go on. And I was like, this must just be what new records are like. So I pressed down with all of my might, and it kind of like snapped into place, you know? I was like, that did not sound right. And then I turned on the record player and I dropped the needle into the groove. The first song on that record is called Angels and Demons. I've never played that song live, and I think it has to do with this experience. Because what I heard was not quite the opening chords to Angels and Demons, but something squeakier, more desperate. And then the vocal came in, and it was like I was listening to a Chipmunks record. My wife was in the other room. She's like, did you put it on 45? I was like, no, it's on 33. I know what I'm doing. And I tried to flip the record, but it was stuck on the turntable, so I had to kind of jostle it, yank it around until finally it popped off. Flipped it over, B-side, same deal. Tiff song was being sung by Alvin. So I did what any 20-year-old in complete despair would do. Absolutely nothing. For about 2 months, I did not contact this company. Because it felt to me like I was receiving this message that maybe all of this pride that I had been feeling was misplaced. That maybe this was not what I thought it was. That maybe it wasn't worth it after all. And, you know, obviously I had to override that with some good old-fashioned adult common sense. And I sent a very stern Canadian email that said, this is completely unacceptable. Please rectify the situation. And they must have been Canadian too, because they responded, we completely understand. As if they dealt with this situation every day of their lives. And they said, unfortunately, you only have 2 weeks to make a complaint about your order. I said, I have 2 weeks to listen to both sides of 500 records to make sure you know how to do your job? And they said, yes, that's right. So I sat with that for another 2 months. Before I decided I just had to see it through anyway. bunch of money I didn't have to make a whole other order. Imagine just the environmental impact of 500 vinyl records going in the garbage. I couldn't have that. I still have them in my basement. Collecting mold and waiting for the time when I really break through and these mold records can be worth something. Anyway, this song is from that